tonight's session. Before I get started, I did want to make a few observations and announcements. It was just Veterans Day, so happy Veterans Day to all of the veterans who are joining us tonight. And it is International Suicide Prevention. So we are double tapping tonight as we have I think a very intersectionally focused panel, because we are really, I think, very touched by this topic. I know I am personally. I also wanted to make mention, for those of you who were with us for our Workplace Promise Institute in September and got to meet Ed Schrank, who sang the national anthem for us. He was a cancer patient and he passed away on Saturday. I think Joe has his obituary. If you can put that in the chat, or we will share some of that information online. He was definitely a hero to us. We were so honored that his last performance was for us at the US Capitol and then at our conference at the American Legion. So I wanted to make sure that we honored him, as well as to make sure that as we discuss suicide tonight, that we do it in a mindful way. 988 is the suicide prevention hotline. If you press 1, that will take you to the VA directly. If you don't want to talk to the VA, 988. There are other resources. Vets for Warriors is a really good one for everybody in the veteran community, but there's lots of opportunities to get help. I think that in this community we're always mindful that we need to be watching out for each other. That's why I started Whistleblowers of America. It was my own experiences with the Defense Suicide Prevention Office when I found that there was an attempt at waste, fraud, and abuse. I made my disclosures. It cost me my job. It took me 5 years, and I finally got the MSPB to agree that what they did was retaliatory, and I got my benefits out of that. But it didn't change the fact that we lost the suicide prevention programs that I was working on. And that is something that I think for many whistleblowers is that tangible change that we were looking for that we didn't get. No matter how long or how this goes on, I think that we're looking for ways to make and hold the entities responsible for accountability. So with that kind of said as my own introduction, why this is personal to me. And I met Amy many, many years ago when I was working for the Defense Suicide Prevention Office. And I think, Amy, you were working with TAPS then, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. So Amy, if you would kind of take it from here and introduce yourselves. And then I am so honored that we have LaShanda here with us tonight and Peter as the attorney in this case, because accountability does matter. Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Neiberger, and I am the surviving sister of Army Specialist Christopher Neiberger. My brother was killed in combat in the Iraq War in 2007, and that propelled me into advocacy and support for other grieving military families and also for veterans. And so as part of my journey, I have done a lot of work in legal advocacy for survivors. And over the years, I met Peter Bertling. And Peter is very unique as an attorney goes. After his own experience with loss related to suicide, he decided to apply his years of legal expertise to assist military and veteran families grieving deaths by suicide that are linked to medical malpractice. And his cases are often impacted by whistleblowers. We're going to be discussing one of those cases tonight. He is involved in suing the Department of Veterans Affairs and other entities in order to help hold those systems accountable and does win financial support quite often for families. He's worked a number of these cases, and we are very privileged tonight to also have with us LaShanda Moon, who is the surviving spouse of Army veteran Jason Moon, who died by suicide while under the care of the South Bend Vet Center in 2020. And we're going to be discussing a little bit about the Moon family's case, and Peter is going to be talking a bit about his approach to these cases, and LaShanda will also be speaking. And then we're going to talk a bit about how whistleblowers have impacted these cases. So let me say a little bit more about Peter. He spent about 30 years actually learning the ins and outs of defending medical providers and saving insurance companies millions of dollars in damages by negotiating medical malpractice, wrongful death, and elder abuse cases. So he is kind of like a super insider for these cases because he understands how they are litigated, and has also been very compassionate with survivors. I've worked with many attorneys over the years. Peter is definitely someone who builds great connections with families and really listens to them and hears their concerns and answers their questions. So Peter, would you like to make some comments, some remarks?
Yes. So Jackie, thank you for inviting me and LaShanda to participate with Whistleblowers of America today. I think it's important that you are fulfilling a responsibility of holding people accountable when they don't do what they're supposed to do. And I am not here to bag on the VA. I think that the VA, and you could probably attest to this, Jackie, has done some incredible work.
Absolutely.
They have outstanding policies and procedures that are designed to help prevent death by suicide of not only veterans, but of active duty military people. And I think it's also important to recognize that it is their stated goal, that it is one of their primary goals is to prevent suicide and have a zero suicide policy. But sometimes these goals and these policies and procedures aren't followed for a number of different reasons. And things fall through the cracks. People aren't trained on policies and procedures. There's inadequate staffing. People aren't hired that are qualified to do the positions or the jobs that they're supposed to be doing in this setting of mental health. And that's why, unfortunately, some of the folks that come through the VA or are in active duty end up dying by suicide and leaving behind a family like LaShanda. I got a call from LaShanda a couple years ago. I think she had read about one of the cases that I had handled, and I was able to file a claim on her behalf with the Department of Veterans Affairs. And typically what you have to do in these type of cases, because you are suing the government, the first thing you need to do in order to move a claim along is to file a claim. And so when LaShanda reached out to me and talked to me about her case, I was able to go through it with her. I understood the issues, and we ended up filing a claim just before the statute of limitations ran, because you have a 2-year statute of limitations within which you need to bring these lawsuits or claims against the Department of Veterans Affairs. And shortly after we filed the claim, the Office of Inspector General for the VA actually issued a pretty scathing report of what happened, and they identified the deficiencies through the vet center, how Jason, who was LaShanda's husband, had not received proper mental health treatment, had been being treated by somebody who wasn't really qualified. And there were 5 different people who were whistleblowers about the inadequate administration at the vet center in Indiana, where Jason and LaShanda and their 5 children lived. So one of the things that I try and do is avoid a lawsuit. because when you file these cases, it opens a lot of wounds for the family. They are reliving things that they've tried to forget, that they will probably never be able to forget. And so what I try to do is protect them from having to go through full-blown litigation if possible. And thankfully, in LaShanda's case and her family's case, we were able to get this case resolved at the claims level. And I think one of the primary reasons we were able to do that is because of the whistleblowers who were involved, that were willing to step up and say, this is what was going on that shouldn't have been happening. This is what we were being told to do. For example, they were being told to downplay the level of the suicide assessment, because if it was being reported as moderate or a high level of suicide, the director of this VA center was concerned that they were going to be getting much more national attention from the VA, and that was something that they wanted to avoid. So in this particular case, the other thing that I did is I dealt with the attorney for the Department of Veterans Affairs and explained to them what the family had gone through and how we really did want to try and resolve the case. So we were able to avoid a lawsuit, and that doesn't always happen. And even though it took a little bit longer than I think LaShanda and I would have liked, the VA ended up resolving the case for almost as much as the maximum amount of money that LaShanda and her children could have gotten if this case would have gone to federal court and was before a judge. One of the interesting things about these cases is because you are suing the Department of Veterans Affairs, and then when you file the lawsuit, you're actually suing the United States of America, is you don't get a jury. You are assigned a judge. One person is going to make a determination about the value of your claim, putting a value on your last loved one's life. And these are people who have been appointed by Congress or approved by Congress to be district court judges. They're not people you can pull the wool over their eyes. For example, right now I'm defending a 31-year-old widow in Fort Lauderdale before Judge Eileen Cannon. And so I'm working with her on that case. She's the judge assigned by that case. But once you get to that process, it is much more invasive and much more difficult on the family because they are being deposed. They're asked to participate in discovery. They have to turn over their personal mental health records. And a lot of things happen to them that they really didn't want to have happen, but it's what's necessary in order to hold that accountability. So that's a little bit of how these cases work. And I wanted to ask LaShanda to share with you folks why it was important for her to move forward with this litigation, because LaShanda had shared with me, like most of my clients, that certainly they'd like to get compensation to the extent possible because they do have some significant financial hardships when they've lost the breadwinner in their family or somebody that was assisting them financially. But one of the other things that LaShanda and most of my clients mentioned to me, and I noticed there's a lady here today, I think it's Shannon McDaniel, who I recently started working with, who does incredible work in Alabama and who unfortunately lost her son Hunter to death by suicide. But one of these things that these families universally want to do is to affect change, to try and prevent this from happening to somebody else, to another family, to prevent them from going through what my clients go through after losing their loved one to death by suicide. So LaShanda, if maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit, tell us a little bit about your kids. I know you've got 5 kids and you recently found a new home that you're living in and things are a little bit easier for you at this point. But could you help the folks here understand what motivated you to bring a lawsuit or file a claim against the Department of Veterans Affairs. And as a result of going through this experience, although I know it will never bring Jason back, and I know the kids will never have their dad again, and you'll never have your husband again, how has this experience impacted you personally? I'd appreciate it if you would share that with the folks online here today.
I'm LaShanda. Jason and I were married 14 and a half years. Married when we were 18 and 19. I was 32 when he passed away. And our children were 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, 9, and 12 at the time. I'm going to get emotional, obviously. He had been struggling for several years, and we had been reaching out for help, and he was really, really good at functioning outside of the house. So it was easy for him to hide how things were. He attempted in April 30th, 2020, and May 5th was when we first set foot in the South Bend Vet Center, and I had to take him due to his attempt. He had no feeling in his dominant arm, so he couldn't drive, he couldn't write. So I was present for the intake interview and filled out all of his paperwork. And the man that did the intake, I had no idea at that point in time that just a couple years later, that very man would be one of the whistleblowers, and that he would be one that risked his job and to get justice for Jason and everything else that was happening in the facility. So he started going. This was obviously right at the height of COVID, and they told us that they were not allowed to see veterans in person, which later found out this was false, and that everything had to be done by phone. So we did the initial in person, and then he started his phone appointments, and he was seeing an unlicensed intern. And we had a lot going on in our lives at the time. There was legal stuff going on, just a lot of really intense stressors. Jason was pretty vocal about his struggles with alcohol, all of his, everything that was going on, and it's very well documented in all of his records. His very first record it states that he basically has visible undiagnosed PTSD. And then in August, just 3 months later, after he started going there, he self-admitted for the very first time. And when he got out, he spoke to his therapist, the unlicensed intern, told him he had self-admitted that he was still struggling with wanting to end his life as of that very moment. And it was documented in his records that he said these things, and the intern that was his last session with Jason. He was leaving the facility. Jason was being handed over to a new therapist, and it stated in there it was very crucial that follow through and follow up be done, and that he was high risk, and that it was, everything was just kind of at a critical point. Every single note in his records was signed off on by the director, Mark Bolin, except for that one note. And then Jason was assigned the new therapist. That was Christy. And it states in his records that she made multiple attempts to get in contact with him and that he never responded. Basically, she falsified his records because once I became aware of all this, I still to this day have his cell phone that has all of his text messages, phone calls, everything on it. And there were text messages and phone calls with her where he told her, "I'm struggling, when can I see you?" And it took her 5 days to respond. and that wasn't his first, like, they had been in contact before. So all of this happens, and then I believe it was October 18th is when she noted in his records that she had never had contact with the veteran, and she was closing out his file. He had killed himself October 15th. And it was, she falsified his records to cover her own negligence. And you know, if I didn't have his phone, a lot of this never would have come out. But I want to say it was probably April of 2021. My children were actively seeing the two therapists that, the one therapist, Christy, and the director, Mark, at that facility for bereavement therapy. And I was also being seen. So I didn't know about any of this that had gone on. And I was called in at that point in time, and I was filled in by a couple of the whistleblowers and an investigator from Senator Mike Braun's office on what was going on, and that these whistleblowers had decided to come forward once they put all these pieces together. And they basically, Senator Braun's office needed my go-ahead to move forward with an AIB and all of that, do their investigation. And you know, I got Jason's records and was able to read everything. And in his situation, he was seeing an unlicensed intern by phone. So there was never the face-to-face where you could possibly, I mean, you can look into somebody's eyes, and it's very visible in his eyes looking at photographs. Which points were the points that he was at his lowest. And so that was never there. And you know, by phone you can play things off a little bit better than you can in person. There, you know, it's not like it was by video, it was just a phone call. He was never referred to the only licensed substance abuse therapist in the facility, who later was my therapist. And before all of this happened, he had no idea who Jason was. And again, he was the substance abuse therapist. He was who Jason should have been referred to. The vet center never once requested any of Jason's records from his 2 or 3 hospital stays. You know, from his attempt, his voluntary admittance, and there was an instance back in 2018 when he did, I believe, 5 days inpatient. None of these were ever requested. So there are steps that should have been taken. He should have been flagged as high risk, and it was noted, those exact words, that he should have been. And the director did not sign off on it, and actually issued a memo that they were not to, as Peter said, they were not to flag anybody as high risk, because I believe the exact words that he used in the memo were that it would create increased scrutiny from DC.
LaShanda, I've heard that from other VA employees, from other whistleblowers who get these kind of memos or see these kinds of instructions and feel very stuck. You know, they're not sure what they should do when they see this. So when did the employees, did they first approach you, or did they first who did they first make contact with? Like, how did you begin to put this together, that there was this standard of care issue? And trust me, I'm doing everything I possibly can to not comment on what I think of the standard of care. I'm just trying to, for the moment, just try to guide through the story.
They had actually reached out, if I remember correctly, originally they reached out to local law enforcement because there was a lot of stuff. It wasn't just Jason. There was retaliation. There was investigations into fraud being done by the director. There was a lot of stuff taking place. There were 2 other veterans that things were happening, and the OIG issued 2 reports on the same day. One was really focused on Jason, and the other one talked about the other two cases as well, but there's not as much information because if I understood correctly, those families just wanted to be done with it and didn't want to, have to keep dealing with it. So there wasn't as much information. But those reports can be viewed online. And but after they contacted local law enforcement, they then contacted the local congressional offices, which would have been for that district, it was Senator Mike Braun and Congresswoman Jackie Walorski. And only, one office can do an investigation at a time. So Senator Braun's office kind of headlined everything, took care of it with the support of Walorski's office. And they had done their investigating, looking into everything, validating these claims. And then that was when everything was brought to me, laid out, and said, this is what we have. We want to move forward, but we need one family to give us the go ahead. And that was kind of where it went from there. And because of the whole confidentiality and them being employees, they couldn't give me information. It was basically my therapist said that I'm kind of a dog chasing a bone, that once I get hooked on something, I keep digging.
You're talking to the right crowd.
Yeah. And so he said he would sit there and he just waited on me in sessions to put these pieces together. And then he could be like, yes, finally, you see. But I mean, they were like, request his records, get them for yourself, read through them, let us know what your thoughts are. And just, certain things immediately were, the not signing off on the one, the unlicensed intern, the never having communication with the second therapist. All of this started popping up. And then that was when I got his phone out and I saw the text messages, because I was like, I know he contacted, because the night he killed himself, he had actually told me that he was going to give me the new therapist's phone number and kind of let me unleash my wrath on her because she wasn't returning his phone calls. And so he was finally willing to let me step in if I could. But he had never actually given it to me. So I was like, I know he has it. And that was when I found these messages, that was when it clicked. This is the woman that was seeing my children, and that literally just stopped. I mean, there's so much more to that vet center and everything that happened that were involving myself and my children that were never even touched on in the OIG or the claim or anything, because that wasn't the focus. But there was a lot that took place. And
no, I appreciate that. And Amy has put into the chat the OIG report and the it looks like the hearing or another OIG report on especially this. I remember this about the South Bend Vet Center. I remember when that report came out because, like I said, we definitely spend a lot of time with VA employees. And one of our board members, I wish Ted was on here, was a vet center whistleblower and was,
Ted Blickwell?
Yeah.
I was trying to find his, when I went off camera earlier before this started, that I was trying to find my emails with him to privately then ask you if you knew who he was. Yes. He's one that I've been in contact with.
Yes. So he's on our board. He usually is on here. He must be somewhere else because I haven't seen him log in. But yeah, he, these standards of care and these issues have definitely been something we've been tracking. But Peter, if I can go back to you for a second, what constituted evidence? Like putting the record together, the whistleblower statements, what were you able to collect, or what did you get, or who brought all of this to you so that you can put it together as a case? What made it evidence?
So the primary evidence that I use in building a case against the VA or the Department of Defense when we're dealing with active duty are the actual records of, for example, in this case, Jason, where we were able to see the deficiencies just by reviewing the records that he had. And then LaShanda was able to share with me the names of the whistleblowers, and I was actually able to get the memorandums that they actually wrote about the activities that they thought were inappropriate. So then what I do is I take this information, and because I never want to give a family false hope, and I want them to understand that there actually is a legitimate claim here, I then have the records and information reviewed by a mental health expert, whether it be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, licensed clinical social worker, and I take that evidence and I put it together in a form that I send to the VA, and then they start their evaluation. They have 6 months to do that. Sometimes you give them more time before they decide whether or not they want to try and resolve the claim. The other evidence is LaShanda herself. She's able to be interviewed. Because it's during the claim phase, there are no depositions, but there are occasions where the attorney handling the case for the Department of Veterans Affairs will actually interview my clients. It's an informal interview. Sometimes, Jackie, I actually have, for example, right now, a case where during an institutional disclosure meeting, which is a meeting that the VA has when there's something that goes wrong, my client attended an institutional disclosure meeting, and during that meeting, she taped the meeting, and there were so many admissions of liability, and telling her how they failed the veteran, how they failed her, and the changes that they were going to make. So those are the kind of things that I can use as evidence as well. And I just put that all together and then present it and try explain to the Department of Veterans Affairs attorney why this is a case that needs to be settled.
Jackie, can I add something to that?
Sure. I was going to give it a few more minutes, but go ahead. We're definitely
real quick.
at that point.
As a VA whistleblower, the only thing I'll add, and LaShanda, I really appreciate all you've done. I'm a Marine veteran. I suffered from depression, PTSD, and after reporting a contractor repackaging used medical supplies as new at the VA, the retaliation cost me my small business, $1.6 million a year. And right now I have pending arguments before the Fourth Circuit. I was fortunate that Hunt, Andrews, and Kurth took the case pro bono. But what I'll say right now is anybody that's a whistleblower, and LaShanda, you're a whistleblower too, because you weren't treated fairly. And anytime you speak up and you want your voice heard, you're a whistleblower. And what I will say is, you know, what I wish I would have done more of in the beginning, but that I became very good at, is record everything. Every phone call, especially every phone call, because people will treat you differently when they don't think they're going to get caught. And you don't know when that information will come through that's important. Mm-hmm. So once I started working on my legal case, everything was recorded. And that's what ended up allowing me to get a measure of justice. And that's all I have there. LaShanda, I'd love to talk to you further after this. I believe in your cause.
Thank you.
You know, I appreciate those comments, Trey, and thank you for your service. I also wanted to mention there's a different type of whistleblower that's participating today. Her name is Patricia Kime. And I was able to meet Patricia for the first time last year at the TAPS Gala. And there was also Paul Sullivan, who's another type of whistleblower. I knew about Paul Sullivan because of his significant work in the Ninth Circuit here in California and bringing class actions on behalf of veterans who were not getting proper treatment through the VA, particularly related to suicide. So after I had the opportunity to meet Patricia and we spoke that evening, I gave her some information about the situation where my clients weren't getting mental health appointments, or at least the decedents, the veterans who had died by suicide. And so back in October 17th of this year, she wrote an article about that. And as a result of that, the Department of Veterans Affairs is obviously aware of that. But she just published an article on, I think, the 15th of November about how Congress is taking action on that. And really, that's the goal here, is to have people take action to prevent this from happening. So I applaud people like Paul Sullivan. I applaud people like LaShanda, like you, Jackie, like you, Patricia, in bringing these things to the attention of people so things can be done. I applaud people like Shannon McDaniel, who, even though she lost her young son, Hunter, to death by suicide, she's doing what she can to prevent that from happening.
No, thank you for that, and thank you, Trey, for contributing. We are sort of at that half of the hour where we do welcome people to comment and join. I see Amy has put a bunch of resources in the chat. We do try to stay involved with those, or we keep them. But if you have a comment, I know there were so many things earlier people were putting in the chat. Patricia, certainly I would welcome you if you have anything you wanted to add. I know there were so many people online right now that have been sharing in the chat who, if they wanted to join the conversation, you're obviously more than welcome to join in. If you want to raise your hand, or if you don't want to come on camera, you want to ask your question in the chat, I'm happy to read the questions or read your comments as we move along. But barring any of that, I think the question that keeps percolating in my mind here, Peter, is that as you do these lawsuits, and you've done several of them at this point, correct?
Unfortunately, yes.
What is VA's response? And if they respond and say that we'll settle, is there part of the settlement that they're going to fix whatever was broken? Like, I'm very surprised that an intern wouldn't have a supervisor that was case conferencing or reviewing notes. Like, are those the types of things that when you settle a lawsuit that you're finding the VA is responsive to? And do you get any kind of follow-up on those things? Or is that something maybe we should ask Congress to do a hearing on?
So the goal is always to try and get some kind of change made, but there's no way as part of the settlement that can be required. But I can give you an example, Jackie, of something that happened out of the West Palm Beach VA Medical Center. I was representing the family of Bruce Dash. He was a young Marine veteran, and he was actually a patient, an inpatient on Unit 1C of the VA Medical Center. He was there. His wife actually worked at that VA, and she wanted her husband to go there because he had attempted suicide, thought this would be the best place. And they weren't following their policies and procedures. They weren't following recommendations about having alarms on the door if somebody was trying to attempt to hang themselves. And so as a result of, in that particular case, unfortunately, Bruce hung himself. He died by suicide in the VA. They weren't doing their 15-minute checks. They didn't have the cameras like they should have. They didn't have these alarms. And so what happened is, as a result of Bruce's death, there was a national mandate that in all of these units, they did have the sensors on the doors that could alert people if somebody was trying to hang themselves. So we've had a situation like that. During one of the institutional disclosure meetings, My client was told that they would be giving more attention to the vets that came in with mental health issues through the emergency room and paying more attention to those kind of issues, as opposed to just when they came in complaining of shortness of breath or chest pain or things of that nature. But unfortunately, as we went through that litigation, we found out that those were just words that were spoken to her and never followed through. So it's difficult to get them to do something specifically tangible. And that's why one of the things that I do is try and bring this to the attention of the folks sitting on the Department of the Veterans Affairs. I've actually had Amy help me write a letter in the past to do that. And that's what I try and do to try and affect some change above and beyond the lawsuit for the family members.
No,
One
I
of
appreciate that. And if there's anything that is Whistleblowers of America that we could join in on, I mean, I know we're about to go through huge administration and congressional changes, but as we come into a new Congress, if there's any way that we could be supportive of any of those efforts, you know, I'm always happy to help. Amy, I'm still a licensed clinical social worker, so if you need those kinds of eyes, and you know, we can certainly leverage the mental health community that we work with. We started a whistleblower mental health advisory consortium with mental health clinicians to try to look at some of these issues. In the survey I mentioned earlier, which I had put in the chat a while back now, is our way of trying to get at this issue, because we also know that suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among working aged adults in America, and the workplace does not get a lot of attention in this area. So again, this is something I feel really committed to, and happy to partner with you on anything we can.
And Jackie, you had raised this issue about evidence. Let me just tell you about some of the evidence that unfortunately we can't use. One of the things that the VA is required to do when there's a death by suicide is they are required to do what's called a root cause analysis and a behavioral autopsy to find out what happened. And they do that. At least they're supposed to.
Do they do that on every veteran, or only the ones that die on the VA campus?
Well, it's through the VA campus, or if it's been somebody that's been in their care and treatment.
Okay.
So, for example, in this case where I currently have pending before Judge Cannon, they did a root cause analysis, but it's protected. It's privileged information that I'm not entitled to get. And even though I request it, the assistant USA attorney will object to it, and we're never able to get it. But that's where you really get some more information about that. But part of the problem with that is there's actually been some VA OIG reports talking about how they don't properly do those root cause analysis, and things aren't done in accordance with the VA's own directives in that regard.
Peter,
We were one in that OIG where they talked about that. Peter, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but once the veteran dies, I believe they have 30 days that they're supposed to do that, the root cause analysis. And in Jason's case, come April, so 6 months later, that still had not been done. That was when people started asking, where is this report? Why has it not been done? The director just literally did not respond to these emails, ignored that question in every single one. It was never done until the actual AIB started and Senator Braun was pushing stuff. And then they've refused repeatedly to discuss anything that's in it. And according to what I was told by law, they are supposed to tell me, they're supposed to sit down and tell me to an extent what they found, if there was negligence and that sort of stuff, my rights under the Federal Tort Claim Act and all of that. That was never done anytime that we requested it, because I flat out told them, you know, I was like, I just want changes to be made. I want to know how he fell through the cracks, and I want to know what you're going to do to prevent it from happening to anybody else, and I'll go away.
If
Yeah,
I could
so-
jump
so,
in, Peter, one thing I
Yeah,
want to say
so-
too,
Sure,
I'm
Trey.
both a whistleblower and a veteran that's been battling PTSD and depression. And I had to be hospitalized. I almost killed myself 2 years ago. The only reason I survived is because I couldn't find anybody to take my dog, and I was worried that my dog wouldn't be okay.
Mm.
And what I found from the VA OIG, and in my case, I got very fortunate. The general counsel for the Senate VA committee gave me all the emails where VA OIG had lied to the federal courts and the congressional investigation into my case. And what I found as a whistleblower, two things are true. Dealing with PTSD and depression and people like me is hard. So we have to say that at first, because it's not easy to deal with someone like me. My pain is deep and real. The second thing is people are self-serving in government. And most of my time was spent trying to get people to do their job. Everybody, VA OIG included, they tried to sweep my case under the rug because congressional hearings were ongoing. As a pro se litigant, I'm the first pro se litigant in circuit history to be granted a writ of mandamus in oral arguments without counsel.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah,
I see
but we
it.
have to take better care. People will say one thing when a microphone's in front of their face, but the reality when you're trying to get help, I'll give you an example. It's not the VA, but I went to local services because the VA screwed my case up so much. I had procurement officials looking into my mental health record. So I could no longer feel safe even telling, because I was both a contractor, but it was part of a program to help disabled veterans. So I'm dealing with depression and suicide thoughts and also being a whistleblower. And it was just horrendous.
Mhm.
And it's difficult. And whenever people see something difficult and complicated, they want to push it aside. They want to tell you it's someone else's job. I've got an hour-long conversation with the Office of Whistleblower Support where they're saying it's not my job. And I'm telling them, like, the VA doctors in my medical record wrote he's suicidal because the VA won't grant him the whistleblower protection that they promised. My
Yeah.
case wasn't even complicated. I had the VA, after I reported the fraud, I got a letter back saying, thank you for the fraud report. We've learned how to identify it sooner. And
Hey,
so,
Trey,
Go
I
ahead.
need to there are other people with their hands up.
oh, I'm
And
sorry.
I
I'm
don't want to
sorry.
run out of time. So I want to, Francesca, and then Elena is next. Francesca, where'd you go?
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you so much, Jackie, for giving me the floor, and thank you, LaShanda, for sharing your story. I just really appreciate it. I work with Walk the Talk Foundation that advocates for service members who are dealing with all the administrative nonsense inside the DoD and Coast Guard. And related to that, I was kind of curious. So one of the things that our organization is very focused on is the Ferris Doctrine, which prohibits lawsuits against the U.S. government by both service members and their spouses for death or loss of consortium, I think you call it. And I was just wondering, because this is something I'd really never thought about before, are veterans, and maybe this is a question for Peter, are veterans an exception to the Ferris Doctrine? Is it only active duty service members?
Jason was still serving, just so you know.
Oh, okay. So how did you do that then, if you don't mind my asking? Because
That's going
I
to be
mean,
a Peter
literally,
question.
yeah, that we are literally like throwing spaghetti against the wall trying to figure out ideas to knock down the Ferris Doctrine.
So, Francesca, veterans are exempt from the Ferris Doctrine, and Congress has allowed them under what's called the Federal Torts Claim Act, allowed them to bring lawsuits against the United States of America. So when you're suing for this kind of malpractice, you're actually not suing the individual providers. They're not actually named defendants. You are only suing the USA. And one of the things we do in order to hold the individuals liable or accountable is instead of bringing a lawsuit against them, we will report them to the administrative board that controls their license, so that there can be some accountability there. And we'll provide them the information, whether it be the records or the VA OIG report or whatever is available, to help them hold the therapist or doctor or psychiatrist or whoever it is accountable. But that is an issue, the issue with the Ferris Doctrine, and I do anticipate that this next term in Congress, they'll be bringing that issue up again, because I do know that there are a number of senators and Congress members who are trying to have an exception to that for active duty military. And right now, the only thing we have is the National Defense Act, where we can bring a claim, file it with, for example, the Department of the Army or the Department of Navy, but then they're the ones that decide whether or not there's any negligence or breaches in the standard of care. And unfortunately, Francesca, there is no judicial review of that. So you never get into a court, you never have a judge look at it. You essentially have the fox mind the chicken hen here. And, they're the ones that make a decision. And just the other day, I was discussing a case with a new client whose husband died by suicide. And he was active duty. And her very concern was, well, that's like them making a decision and trying to hold themselves responsible. Are you ever successful in that? And that's actually a relatively new thing that's been going on for 2 years now. So we don't have a lot of history on that. And a lot of those claims are still under view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I'll definitely be reaching out to you after this, if that's all right, because
Sure.
I'm just, especially since he was active duty, how did you get past the incident to service aspect of the Ferris Doctrine? So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Oh.
Yeah, so you don't get past the Ferris Doctrine. The Ferris Doctrine, unfortunately, is in full effect. You just have a different potential remedy by bringing a claim against the Department of Defense or Department of Army in this particular case that I'm dealing with right now.
Well, that we will look forward to seeing more and hearing more about that, because I know Joe Wade is on our board. He's I know he's listening too. He's worked with Natalie Quam, who used to be on our board, and she has been very, very active with Congress,
Yes,
the Ferris Doctrine, and has chipped away at some of those provisions that has kept veterans from or the active duty from being able to sue the VA or the DoD for anything. Now they can for medical malpractice.
Right.
We've been trying to get them to accept cases for like negligence and other harms that they have yet to be held accountable for when they don't do their jobs. I see, Elena, you've had your hand up, so I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say, LaShanda, that you are so incredible. Your children are so profoundly lucky to have you fighting in this way. And I'm so glad that you found Peter, who clearly is in some ways a trauma-informed attorney, it would seem, the way that he's kind of approached some of this. I wonder, LaShanda, what advice might you have for other people who would be in your position? Because it's so remarkable that you could have gone through such a tremendous loss and still fought in the way that you did. For most normal humans, they would be crushed by this, LaShanda, and you somehow pulled through for your 5 children and other veterans.
I didn't have an option. I couldn't crumble. And my kids are, honest to God, the only reason that I'm still here. It has been a domino effect, because me and 3 of the kids were home when he did it. I was present and I was holding our 12-month-old. So, I have severe PTSD and anxiety myself. My children have PTSD and anxiety, depression. We've had multiple actual attempts. Just very recently, one of my children spent 18 days in the hospital after I found them unconscious and unresponsive. October of every year is really rough. But I'm also the type of person that I do better being angry than I do it being sad or having nothing to focus on. So once all of this was coming out, and I was just like, I know at his funeral, I didn't know any of this. And I remember I stood up there and I told everybody, I don't know how yet, but I'm going to make something good come out of this. And I mean, I had no idea how. And I'm not done. I'm more than willing to do as many of these interviews as we need so that people hear. There are so many, the VA and the way that they handle spouses, spousal rights within the VA are so messed up. When you're things that I found through this whole process that need to change for the spouse and for the family members. When you're in, say, you go in with your spouse for counseling at the VA, individual and marital or whatnot, your records are not yours. My records legally belong to Jason Moon. And when say he were alive today and we were going through a divorce, he could subpoena my records and submit them to the court to use my mental health against me. But my attorney could not access my records themselves because they belong to Jason. And through this whole process, it was within the last year, the VA finally gave me my records. They gave me Jason's and they gave me my children's, but they would not give me mine. They told me they did not belong to me. They belonged to Jason. Which, then I was, well, his records now belong to me because I'm the next of kin. But those are just things that the spouses need to be more informed. We need to know what our rights are when we're dealing with the VA. We do have a voice, but I mean, I was a good little warrant officer's wife. I kept my mouth shut and I let him try to handle his thing and stay out of it. But I think, the spouses need to be more involved, and I really feel like they need to bring us into these sessions, even once in a while, or just check in with us to see how they're really doing at home and that sort of stuff.
LaShanda, I so appreciate what you just said about how important the rights of family members are here. I wish I can give you a hug. I squeeze your hands together so you can feel me hugging you. I'm sorry. If somebody owes you an apology, I know it's the federal government. I just so feel for what you have been through, and that we really do need to make people accountable for the actions that they take and to be humanistic in their approaches. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own bureaucracies that we can't lose sight of the people on the other end. And my heart goes out to you and your family. We are here for you. You know how to get in touch with me. We are a small but mighty nonprofit.
I would like to add something.
Sure.
Through all of this, I will still say I am not anti-VA. My husband has he has an immediate family member that works for the VA, and she's really struggled with knowing everything. And I still refer people to the VA. I still refer people to that exact facility. And when I'm like, why are you sending me here? You're suing them. And but the staff that were there the last time I stepped foot in that facility were good people. They were the whistleblowers. They were the new staff. They were doing what they could in that facility to make changes. So I will be the first to say that I will tell every veteran, go, this is an option. And if that's not it for you, there's so many other organizations. And I have friends that are a very big part of several organizations that are specifically for preventing veteran suicide. And I'm always trying to if you don't want to go VA, then go these private places.
No, I agree. I think earlier I said that, there should be no wrong door. And if the door doesn't seem like it's opening right, or it doesn't feel like the right door, then find the next door. That's the 988, the crisis line, crisis text. All of those resources are available. That's for warriors. I always throw them in the mix. TAPS is another great organization. There is so much help and support out there. If you're on right now and you haven't put your contact information in the chat and you would like to share your work, I see Amy put Peter's contact information in the chat, so that if anybody wants to have a conversation, I'm assuming he's available. I'm letting you all know that one of the reasons we do this is so that we can stay connected and we can catch up. I think there's some good follow-up that we can have from this. I've got a couple of questions. Amy, you and I are going to be talking, and I appreciate everybody for joining. Some of the other advocates, I know Paul Sullivan was on the line. I saw Patty has played a role in my story too. So my heart was so happy to see you join us tonight. Whistleblowing is a struggle. Peter, I'd love to know more about what happened to some of the whistleblowers. Hopefully they've stayed employed. There is always more to do. I mean, there's always another chapter, a turn the page, another part of the story. So I encourage everybody to please stay in touch, stay in contact with us. I did early in the beginning of the chat. I know the chat's really gotten busy, but there is a lot of information that we're collecting through a survey, through our 6-word story. We will meet December 17th is our next roundtable, where we can have more of an open conversation and discussion. And please, if you have suggestions or ideas for other roundtable themes, please send them to me. Paul and I have been working on the 2025 schedule, and we have some ideas cooking, but if you have a suggestion, we would love to hear from you. Please let me know if you have any questions. You can always send me an email, Jackie@Whistleblowers of America. Most people know me. And then I see Paul put a reminder in that this will be posted online. Takes us a few days, but we will get it on our YouTube channel. So thank you all so much. I'm only 4 minutes over tonight. So thank you. With much love and appreciation for everybody who has joined tonight. You are amazing and keep doing great things. So thank you.